Good evening, one and all. I especially wish to welcome the family of the Barbados Labour Party to the most beautiful parish of St. James here early in this new year, and to especially welcome all the constituents and residents of the Northern Zone, because this is a Northern Zone meeting, and in particular, of course, those of St. James North, for whom I am eternally grateful for giving me an opportunity to serve them in Parliament. Also wish, of course, to welcome those who are not traditionally part of the Barbados Labour Party family. Dr. Russell, I see Avanas Prasad there, Professor Prasad, who would have met with us recently. Welcome. And, of course, I see my mother in the audience, for whom, if not for her, I would not be here, and my wife. We are here, of course, in the first of a series of Assembly Hall meetings this afternoon to speak and dialogue with you and to obviously get your feedback as well as to where we can go in terms of the future of this country. One thing I think everyone on all political sides agrees is that our beautiful country is presently at its most serious socio-economic crossroads ever since the advent of adult suffrage. We are in perilous times. And we are in perilous times because of mismanagement of an economy, because of incompetence by the worst government ever in the history of the Caribbean. Don't let's fool ourselves about that. This is a government that has not been straight with the people of Barbados. This is a government that does not merit your trust. This is a government that has lost all, if any, credibility which it ever had. And first, let us look at the economics of the situation. By our reckoning, the deficit in this country, the deficit in our economy is around $1.7 billion, or about 12% of the gross domestic product. So we are in serious debt. That is what that means, because those who are not economists like me may not understand all the fanciful figures that the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, one of the greatest politicians ever from the Caribbean, will understand. But the long and short of it, everybody understands that if you're earning $10 and you're spending $30, that don't reckon out. And the women of Barbados especially, who have to manage their home finances on a tight scale, understand that more than anybody else. We're in real debt. And this is taking into account all the debts that the government owes. The debts that they owe all the CLICO policy holders, the 30-odd thousand that they promised to pay up to 4 years ago and can't get paid yet. Promises made by the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, the Governor of the Central Bank, but yet their pals are protected. The debt that they owe the University of the West Indies, $200 million it was this time last year. I believe they paid a $40 million. It has climbed back up because interest on it, etc. And when the Democratic Labour Party could dismantle something that was regarded as sacrosanct by both political parties, free tertiary education of Barbadians at the University of the West Indies, you know that all things gone mad in this country politically. Because that was a cornerstone of our development as a people. Free secondary education and free tertiary education. Started from the 1950s, gradually, under Sir Grantley Adams, the Right Excellent, then becoming comprehensive in the 1960s. That also takes into account the debt owed to Al-Barra climbing by thousands of dollars every day in the interest payments. The debt owed to the private enterprise of Barbados, companies that do work, supply goods and services for government that are not being paid. Last year, I think just before the election, it was about $50 million, and the Minister of Finance told the private sector that they're going to pay it soon. Still has not been paid, and that is as well stifling the private sector in terms of their growth and development and in terms of their ability to employ. That is one of the reasons why the private sector has laid off or severed 16,000 odd people since the Dems came into office in 2008. And our calculation of the deficit at $1.7 billion contrasts greatly with what the government is telling you, because in his ministerial statement delivered on the 13th of last month, the Minister of Finance told us that the deficit was $511 million. It is much higher than that. We're in real trouble. Additionally, our foreign reserves, something that again is sacrosanct in terms of economics, that a country must have an adequate supply of foreign reserves. I think that 16 weeks is the accepted standard. Under the Barbados Labour Party led by Owen Arthur, it was $2.7 billion in January 2008 when the election was called. Now, last month, the foreign reserves had declined to 10 million or so. $1 billion in foreign reserves last month. Showed up now by a loan from a company called Credit Suisse of $150 million. So it has climbed up now. So when the governor of Central Bank tells you now that our foreign reserves now stand at 13.9 weeks, he said, it is not because of any miracle or good doings by the Democratic Labour Party. It's because the government has now borrowed money from Credit Suisse, an international company. And you will remember that this is after the October last year debacle when we went to the United States market and could not raise any money. Nobody wanted to see the government. Nobody wanted to see the central bank governor or the minister in terms of acquiring a loan. And the excuse was given to us as if we are little babies with no comprehension that the United States government has shut down. You can imagine that? That you're going to use that excuse to big men and women, 280,000 Barbadians living here, plus all the thousands living abroad, that you couldn't acquire a loan because a United States government shut down. We all know the reason why they could not acquire that loan. But this Credit Suisse loan must rank among the most draconian ever negotiated by any Barbados government. The negotiation fee alone was $2.25 million Barbados. That went straight out to the loan before Barbados started to access any money. $2.25 million Barbados dollars in negotiation fees paid to the lender. The interest rate is astronomically high, 7.5% to 8.5%, and provision for it to vary upwards every 6 months. You know, when the Minister of Finance rushed through this loan at 9:30 a Tuesday night, while we opposition MPs were being given the resolution to pass this loan, he said, you know, there's nothing untoward about the loan, it's normal. You know, another surprise sprung out of some hat of a circus on the people of Barbados. This loan, there is provision in this loan that the interest rate would increase astronomically if Barbados gets a further downgrade from Standard & Poor's, Moody's, or Fitch's. Agencies that, of course, the Democratic Labour Party government has dismissed as not being relevant to the socio-economic status of Barbados. But yet, if any of these international credit rating agencies give Barbados a further downgrade, and you know we've been getting downgrades like water, 2 a year within recent times. If we get another downgrade, the people of Barbados will have to pay a much higher interest rate in foreign currency on this loan. So in other words, we in a vicious cycle of borrowing to pay back loans throughout short-term solutions without any long-term relief. Furthermore, a condition subsequent of this loan, in other words, something that must come after the loan then, is that Barbados has to show the Credit Suisse company, who lent them the money, how they have implemented any specific recommendations made under the IMF. You know, they were here last month. Even before they got on the plane, the Minister of Finance was making his ministerial statement on the 13th. In other words, it's like if we, under the directive of the IMF now, we are no longer a sovereign country that we fought hard to gain and we fought for to maintain. So, to draw down further on this loan, the Barbados government has to show how it has carried out the specific recommendations under the Article 4 consultation of the IMF. And that is where the public sector layoffs fit in to the jigsaw puzzle. Because ultimately, we politicians must be in this field and career to serve the people. That is ultimately what matters. The quality of life of the people of Barbados must be first and foremost in terms of what we as politicians do. Your physical security and your economic and social security. And we now find ourselves facing a double-faced monster of debt, unacceptably high debt, and a shortage of foreign reserves for which the Democratic Labour Party government has no answer. And where does this lead us? The Minister of Finance on the 13th of last month announced 3,000 public sector employees to be laid off starting this week, the 15th of January. 2,000 starting this week, he said, and another 1,000 before mid-March. Now, is this government for real? Is this not a government that told us throughout the election and even before that not one public officer permanently appointed in a permanent position, in a temporary position, temporary public worker with temporarily being defined by no less a person than the Prime Minister? Is this the same government that told us all of that, now saying that it will lay off 3,000 public workers, and in fact a decision previously made to lay off about 5,500? And you know, we get the Minister of Labour conceding that the 400 that went home from drainage on the eve of this new year of our Lord 2014 are not part of that 3,000. So it is like if the 400 drainage workers are non-entities. They are not people now. They are not included. They have no status. So when I looked in the paper there yesterday and see them there at the Erskine Sandifer Sherburne complex there, desperate women, many of them 4 or 5 children, not knowing where the next cent will come from, and still false promises being made to them that the NEAT program will be restructured and started again. Restructured how, with what money? Why can't those who have been given the honor to govern us be truthful with us and be trustworthy? And these are honorable men, because the Prime Minister of Barbados put himself out as this Christian person, a man who can quote St. Paul of the Corinthians at will, and a preacher man, and people felt that he was decent. He is an honorable man. So why can't he come straight with the people of Barbados? These are people's lives we are dealing with. These are the lives of single women, many of them, with children to feed, with children who are to go to school, with children who will be the future of this country. We want them to have a future. We don't want them to have a sense that they must get into criminal activity as a way out. Why must the 16 Democratic Labour Party members of Parliament, the vast majority of whom have been the beneficiaries of free tertiary education, now lick down the ladder on which they have climbed and say no more, and that you have to pay tuition fees as a poor person with 4 or 5 children? And we know that many families, many single women get children close to each other, born a year or 2 apart, so you have 2, 3 children of university age. How are you going to find money for them to be educated at the level that their talent demands and requires? Proverbs chapter 28 verse 2 says, in fact, the righteous considers the cause of the poor, but the wicked closes his eyes to them. The way in which those 400 people at drainage were treated on the last day of last year, on the eve of a new year, being told to put down your tools, you're fired. I thought that that kind of relationship between employer and employee went out when Nelson Mandela and the ANC took over from apartheid South Africa. I could not believe that in this day and age, contemporary Barbados, that a government employer would treat to its citizens and employees in such a manner. This is disgraceful. The Prime Minister himself said it was handled very, very badly. What the Prime Minister should do is offer his resignation on that principle alone. We cannot accept just mere apologies. Everybody apologizing now. He apologized. The Minister of Environment apologized. The Minister of Finance apologized. Apologies don't put food on anybody's table. Apologies does not clothe any child to go to school. Apologies does not pay a water bill or electricity bill. This is a total disgrace. This stands as a black mark on the history of Barbados. We, even appointed public officers, are anxious, because if the Dems could dismantle free tertiary education, they could dismiss appointed public officers too, because there are about 5,300 temporary public officers. So if they go more than that, what will happen with the appointed public officers too, who have been calling us saying, look, Mr. Hinkson, and my fellow MPs, look, boy, here are you going to get sent home too? And this is from a Prime Minister who is an honorable man, who up to the 13th of October last year, at a DLP branch meeting in St. Philip North, said that the permanent secretaries have reported to him on the requested savings, and that these savings now can be met without government having to embark on, to use his words, a carnival of layoffs. So we have to ask, what are 3,000 people? Isn't that a carnival of layoffs? So up to 2 months before the Minister of Finance made a statement, up to 3 months, up to a week ago, sorry, up to 3 months ago, you still have a Prime Minister seeking to deny his credibility. The welfare budget has been cut. The Disabilities Council subsidy has been cut by 50%. People who cannot help themselves, people who have disabilities now, Subsidy cut 50%. What will be the impact of the sending home of the drainage people on constituencies such as mine, St. James North, just right here in Trench? Flood areas. What am I to tell my people when 10 minutes of rain and the area flood out, that the government send home the workers so there's nobody now to come and hose out trench across the road as happens? Who is to blame for this? The blame must rest squarely on the cabinet of Barbados as presently constituted. They have been in office for 6 whole years. The Barbados Labour Party will not accept any blame for this. We have called for the resignation of the Minister of Finance. But the Prime Minister, as leader, must take ultimate responsibility. He can't hide behind closed doors under a veil of silence and escape responsibility. He is the leader. He has to lead. He has to act. And you know, they say that we passed a constitutional amendment that now means that they cannot cut public servants' salary by 10%. Edmund Hinkson or none of his parliamentary colleagues will vote to remove that constitutional amendment. There is absolutely no reason why every time the Democratic Labour Party is in office they must cut public servant salary. Well, what is this here going on at all? 5 years now, you haven't got a salary increase. Cost of living going up 30–40%. And you must cut your salary 10%. Even if the salaries were to be cut 10%, that does not close any gap. That does not close any deficit. What the government must do is start stimulating the economy, its productive areas, its tourism, with tourism declining 10%, whereas St. Lucia's and other islands going up 5%. It must stimulate its international business rather than the Minister of International Business just talking, and whenever he talks, seeking to show up the deficiencies in other ministries and in his colleagues. They must cut the constituency councils of $3 million. The Constituency Council Act says that constituency councils must give reports to Parliament within 6 months of the end of any financial year. They've been around now for 4 years, never one report laid in Parliament of any constituency council. They must cut the political football. They must cut the catering for summer camps. There are ways that we are suggesting that they can cut. We in the Barbados Labour Party have said that there's another way. We know that there is another way and that this country can do better. We are firmly of the view that, for instance, lowering the energy costs, which can be done immediately by placing a subsidy on energy, can stimulate the economy. We have the view that we can create science parks, that we can create townships for the University of the West Indies rather than cut the University of the West Indies budget. We cannot take a full term of this government. The people of Barbados, the people outside of Barbados have lost whatever confidence they have had in this Democratic Labour Party government. We must band together as communities. We must put our future in our own hands. We in the Barbados Labour Party, we parliamentarians will walk with you all the way. And we can only ask the Lord, as the psalmist in Psalm 120 verse 2 said, we can only ask the Lord to deliver our souls from the lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. I thank you. I'm obliged.